Been with us before. Looking forward to another day together. Reverend Nathan is an ordained minister and the adult program manager at Zephyr Point Camp and Conference Center. He helps curate opportunities of rest, renewal, and reflection. He is also a certified trainer for the Soul Shop, which helps communities of faith minister to those experiencing suicidal depression. He recently finished a graduate certificate in theopoetics and theological imagination at Berkeley Theological Seminary. Nathan enjoys writing, creating music, and watching his beloved Memphis Grizzlies. Nathan, his wife Marissa, and their 2 dogs are enjoying their move from Tennessee and living out west in the beauty of Lake Tahoe. So Nathan, I welcome you to the platform.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's good to be back here with you all here at Unity. Just so you know, I need 5 things for it to be Thanksgiving. I don't know what you feel about Thanksgiving, but I need 5 things. I need turkey. I'm sorry if you don't like turkey. I need cornbread dressing, not stuffing. No, cornbread dressing. I need something sweet potato. I need something pumpkin. And the most vital thing is I want cranberry, but I need it out of the can. I want to see the jelly rings on it. That is Thanksgiving for me. I don't know what it is for you, but that is it for me. Now, for this holiday, my mother and my sister are visiting, and grateful for them to be here. And I was sharing with my mother a little bit about what I wanted to talk about today, and she reminded me when I was little, we had a kerosene heater downstairs in our basement, and I desperately wanted to make sure that I touched it. I don't know why, but I just wanted to touch it. And she told me, hey, don't do that. It will harm you. It will burn you. And so I touched it. I also, younger Nathan, my first job out of college was working at a church, and we held something called a lockout, which is basically instead of a lock-in in a building, we went out into the community and did a bunch of fun stuff, and then came back. And when we came out, parents were coming to pick up their kids, but we had a little time in between. And so younger Nathan is a little more competitive than older Nathan was. And one of my youth said, hey, we should race. And I felt like I should show him that I am better at racing than him. So we raced. We were in the children's wing of the church, and it was like a nice little hallway, corridor, if you will. And we raced, and he beat me. I did not take that lightly. I said, this cannot happen. This will not stand. And so we decided to race back down the hallway. And just so you know, I was going so fast that I felt the need to put my arms out to brace myself. I just want you to know I did win the race, but probably lost the war because I crashed through a glass door, and I took a moment to kind of like gain my senses and go, oh gosh, is anybody hurt? Check on people. And then some of the youth were like, hey, you're bleeding pretty bad. And I looked down, and you can look at my arm, but I have the wounds of that time. I went to the hospital. I had about over 100 stitches that day, and I'm okay. Everything's fine, and everybody else was fine. But just so you know that a little bit of my wounds that are visible, you can see. Now, some wounds aren't self-inflicted. So, for instance, there was a girl in my elementary school class. I can't remember if it was on purpose or not, but I just remember she stabbed me with her pencil, and I have that mark on me as well. Some wounds are visible, but some wounds aren't. Some wounds are like when you first learned of disappointment, or the first time you ever had your heart broken or felt rejection. One of my favorite songs says, Life goes on because it has to. These things never leave. They stay with you. And these wounds tend to find their way towards what we would like to say is they haunt us. Or as my favorite theologian and philosopher Peter Rollins points out, that we should think of ourselves at times, our whole person, as a haunted house. In other words, each one of us has ghosts that live within us. These ghosts are things like pain and regret and embarrassment and shame and guilt, and we carry those things around. And there's no getting rid of those ghosts because there's no changing why those ghosts exist, but there is something we can do in terms of what these ghosts become. For instance, if we ignore these ghosts, if we try to push them down, they'll haunt us. They'll become poltergeist, constantly trying to surface and get our attention and mess up our life. This happens all the time in our lives. When guilt goes undealt with, it comes out in anger. When the stress of regret is ignored, it pops up physically with headaches and high blood pressure and all types of things. When grief goes unexplored, it will eventually change our behavior. We'll become irritable and contentious and do things like blame people for all the things that are going on. We are all haunted houses, and our ghosts, when ignored, will become poltergeist. When our wounds fester, we're more like the living dead. But I want to encourage us to be the walking wounded. But now that term might elicit, or you might think about soldiers that are returning, and maybe that is a term that is used in that kind of sense. But I was reading about this term in an article in Psychology Today. And the author of that said, the walking wounded are those who believe closure exists and who want closure but think they cannot obtain it. They may believe that closure exists in some form for some people, but just not for them. They're stuck in this holding pattern, eternalizing their belief that without closure, they can't move on. They can't keep walking. And to me, that resembles more of what I would call those who are living dead, rather than those who are walking wounded. In the newsletter this week, if you saw it, I used a quote from a song by a band called Bird Talk called Heavy. And it goes, if you're lost and lonely, go figure out why. Take a trip to the dark side. Go on and have a good cry, because we're all lonely. We're all lonely together. Leave what's heavy behind. And again, I resonate, I empathize with folks who hear those words and take them to heart. But a part of me also thinks, again, leaving what's heavy behind isn't the goal. Because these things, they never leave. They stay with you. Maybe it's more like another song that says, we all get lonely. There's no way around it. We all get lonely, and then we make it through. Returning to that article I read in Psychology Today, it says that we can learn to carry grief and live with loss without ever arriving at any destination called closure. Healing is a journey, not a place. And I think each of us are examples because we are here on a journey, making it through, an example of walking wounded. Recently, I was reading a book called Everything, or Story is Everything, by Caitlin Curtis. And the subtitle of her new book is Reclaiming the Power of Stories to Heal and Shape Our Lives. In the chapter on stories of aging and happiness, she shares about this concept of blue zones. And this term was coined by a National Geographic explorer and journalist. In blue zones, they identify that there are like these Power 9 factors to health and happiness that they see in certain geographical regions. And those 9 are to move naturally, which means more about exercising not in a strenuous, confined time, but learning how to incorporate movement naturally into your life. So when you're doing house chores and gardening and those kinds, do more of that than the strenuous kind of like, we're just going to exercise an hour a day. To find purpose, that people in these blue zones that seem to live longer and have happier lives are people of purpose, that they know what their life is about and has meaning towards it. These folks in this kind of blue zone also learn how to downshift or find ways to manage their stress and worry in healthy and constructive ways. It talks about the 80% rule, which is don't eat past 80% full, which is an odd thing to talk about at Thanksgiving. The next one is plant slant, or to incorporate more vegetables and things like that in your diet than meat. Wine at 5, or thinking about moderation in terms of alcohol use. They found in these blue zones that people who have found belonging, whether that be a faith-based community or some other purpose-led community, that purpose and that belonging matters. That normally in these blue zones, they find that they prioritize family. And then finally, it talks about finding your right tribe or social circles that support health and wellness. Now, the point of this isn't to say, hey, adopt this and you'll never be wounded. In fact, for me, as I think about these factors and kind of think about additional circumstances and things that are left out, I find that some of this stuff is not just unattainable, but could be harmful in some circumstances. For me, I want to use this more as a gauge for my own understanding of what is the point of life? I mean, is life about avoiding being wounded? Now, risk avoidance might be a good business practice, but I don't think it's the best way to structure life. What might be a better story for those of us who are thinking about living with our wounds rather than them haunting us? There's a story about the 2 wolves that maybe you've come across before. There's an old Cherokee grandfather that's teaching his grandchildren, and it says that a battle is raging inside of me. It's a terrible fight between 2 wolves. One wolf in my life represents fear and anger and envy and sorrow and greed. And then the other one stands for peace and joy and love and sharing and serenity, humility and kindness. And the old man looked at his children and he said, the same fight that I have is the same fight that you have and that everyone has. And so one of the grandchildren asked, which wolf will win? And the grandfather said, the one you feed. So maybe one of the better stories that we can learn for ourselves to continue to move towards walking wounded rather than living dead is that we think about, we learn to feed what's good. That we spend time figuring out what is the good and learn to feed that. Does that mean that all will be fine and good and you'll never experience any kind of hurt or pain or woundedness? No. But it just means you're prioritizing things that are good, things that bring joy, things that feed the wolf that's of beauty and peace and love. Yesterday, some of you might know, was International Day of Survivors of Suicide Loss. And on this day, people gather from all types of walks of life across the world to be in solidarity with one another. And yesterday there was such a gathering at the library in Southlake. I was reading a story about a woman who lost her husband to suicide. And she talks about this story, about how she's not totally healed, but she has come to accept. And I know now that trust, she can carry on. And I try to enjoy life at its fullest and help others by inspiring and sharing my story. Grieving is hard work. It's exhausting at times. It's the most difficult loss that you'll ever experience. But I choose now to talk about it. I'm learning to enjoy the simple things in life. So maybe a better story for those of us who are choosing to try to walk wounded is to learn to feed the good, but also learn to simplify our lives. And one way to think about that is just because something is good doesn't mean it's good for you. I think so many of us are stretched so thin and want to be involved in so many things and want to spend so much time and effort in all these things that bring us joy. But sometimes that is more burden than good. So learning to focus in, not just to learn to feed the good, but also what is good for you today might not be what's good for you for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and that's okay. It's okay sometimes to let things go that are good, to simplify what we're living towards. My wife and I were discussing anxiety and worry, just on a casual Tuesday. And as we were talking about that, we were noticing the differences in how that often manifests in our own lives. And as we talked, the difference I noticed between us isn't that I have more or less, or that she has more or less stress and worry and anxiety. I just think that I tend to let those things rest more. Or as you pointed out, let it sit outside a little bit more. So if we're learning to feed the good, if we're learning to simplify our lives, maybe we should let those things rest a little bit more. Which looks different for every single one of us. For some of us, letting that rest is in prayer, is in meditation, is in being present with God in a more meditative or contemplative space. For others, it might be going out into nature and experiencing the world and all of God's creation. Maybe for others, it's being in community and having a strong sense of love and joy and peace and purpose. Whatever it is, allowing yourself to feed what's good, to simplify your life, and to learn to let those things rest more. I believe we can face our ghost. We can confront and confess and name our guilt and vent our regret and let those things surface and look them all in the face versus keeping them at bay. Bring them up. Make them be known. Don't let them have the power over you that so many people let. The wounds become the power and the force. You are so much more powerful and wonderful when you let the good be important and be the focus. The very act of bringing our pain to the surface is healing in and of itself. And as Peter Rollins names, by honestly naming, confessing, and meeting our ghost, they will go from poltergeist to Holy Ghost. And those kind of ghosts, those kind of stories, we learn and we live to share, can become the balm that heals our wounds and those around us. May each of us live a life to learn to feed the good, to simplify your life, and to let those things that cause us so much worry and stress and pain and anger rest a little bit more each and every day. I pray that this will be a blessing to you. Amen.